The sun rose warm and bright over Oak Ridge Valley Elementary School, the kind of late spring morning that carried a promise of pizza, laughter, and balloons. The front lawn was already alive with the clamor of excited children. Bright posters reading Safety Day, hanging from every post and wall. Teachers herded kids with smiling patience. And the scent of pepperoni and fruit punch floated from the cafeteria windows. Officer Daniel Cruz stood near the edge of the crowd, sunglasses on, hands behind his back, his badge catching the sunlight. At his side sat Shadow, calm and statuesque. The German shepherd's tongue lolled slightly in the heat, but his eyes were sharp, scanning, tracking, always watching. Daniel glanced down and gave a soft whistle. Shadow immediately perked up, alert. "Go ahead," Daniel said with a small smile. "Show them." Shadow trotted forward toward the semicircle of kids sitting cross-legged on the grass. A teacher clapped her hands to call for attention. And the children quieted. "Everyone," she said, "this is Officer Daniel Cruz and Shadow, his canine partner. They're going to show us a little about how police dogs help keep us safe." There was a ripple of excitement. A boy in the front row raised his hand. "Can he talk?" Daniel chuckled as he stepped forward. "He doesn't talk like we do," he said, "but trust me, he hears everything. And he knows what's going on better than most of us." The boy nodded gravely, clearly impressed. Daniel knelt beside Shadow and scratched behind one ear. Shadow here was trained to sniff out all sorts of things: drugs, explosives, even people who are lost or in danger. He saved a little girl last year when a house fire broke out. He went into the smoke without hesitation. The kids gasped. "He's not just brave," Daniel said. "He's loyal. That's the most important thing. He doesn't quit on his team. Ever." Shadow looked up at him for a brief moment, just long enough to catch a flash of something deeper than training. Something like understanding. Daniel cleared his throat and stood. "All right, who wants to see him in action?" Cheers erupted. A teacher handed Daniel a small cloth pouch laced with a harmless trace scent. Daniel walked it across the lawn and slipped it beneath a bucket. Then he gave a short command. Shadow didn't hesitate. He dropped into work mode, nose down, weaving between cones, scanning the grass. When he reached the row of overturned buckets, he paused, sniffed once, twice. Then he sat. Daniel smiled. That's his signal. When he finds something, he doesn't bark or scratch, he just sits. Quiet but certain. The children clapped wildly. Shadow stood and trotted back, tail wagging, as Daniel gave him a treat. They spent the next 20 minutes with more demonstrations, simple drills. Obedience cues. A light game of fetch to make the younger kids laugh. Pizza boxes were opened, juice boxes popped, and someone turned on music from a portable speaker. The lawn turned into a carnival of noise and color. Shadow even let the braver kids pet him, his usual stoicism softening under tiny hands. But then, something changed. Shadow froze mid-step. He was walking back toward Daniel, head low, tail wagging. When he stopped dead, his ears snapped forward, his body went rigid. Daniel noticed immediately. "What is it, boy?" Shadow didn't look at him. Instead, he turned slowly toward the cafeteria, toward the open double doors leading inside. Then he began to walk. Not trot, not sprint, a steady, deliberate walk. Daniel followed. Behind them, the music kept playing. Children laughed and teachers chatted. Oblivious. But Daniel had seen that look before. Something wasn't right. He unbuttoned the snap on his sidearm and caught up with Shadow. "Talk to me," he whispered. "What do you smell?" They passed into the shade of the building. Inside the cafeteria, the lights were low. Tables had been moved to the side. Empty pizza boxes stacked near the trash bins. A few janitorial staff in green shirts wiped down counters and mopped the floor. Shadow kept moving, his head low, sniffing. One of the janitors looked up. "Hey, something wrong, officer?" Daniel didn't answer. He watched Shadow veer sharply left toward the hallway that led to the back storage room and kitchen. "Sir," Daniel called, his voice firm, "I need everyone to stay where they are. Step away from the back rooms." The staff looked at each other, confused. Then Shadow barked. Once. Loud. Sharp. Daniel drew his weapon. "Shadow, show me." The dog bolted into the kitchen. Daniel followed. Weapon raised. Inside, the air was hotter, thick with the smell of grease and tomato sauce. Pots clattered somewhere deeper in the industrial maze of metal and tile. Shadow stopped near a walk-in freezer. He growled low. Daniel approached carefully. The door was slightly ajar. He gripped the handle and pulled. Inside, huddled against the corner of the freezer, was a man in a delivery uniform. His hands were bound with duct tape. His mouth covered. His eyes wide with terror. Daniel holstered his weapon and stepped in, quickly tearing the tape free. "Who did this to you?" The man gasped, his breath fogging in the cold. "It wasn't me. It wasn't me with the food truck. Someone hijacked the delivery earlier. He had my uniform. He locked me in here. Where's the imposter now?" "I don't know. He said something about making a message." He had a bag, a black bag. He was headed back toward the gym entrance. Daniel's blood went cold. Outside, the gym connected to the west wing. Just past it, the assembly lawn, filled with children. He was already moving. Daniel burst out of the cafeteria. Shadow at full sprint beside him. His radio crackled as he called it in. Possible threat on campus. Impersonator in delivery uniform. Searching for suspect near gymnasium. Teachers turned in confusion as he ran past. He barked orders. Keep the kids away from the gym. But didn't slow down. Shadow veered suddenly, barking twice. Daniel followed him around the back of the gym, just in time to see a man slipping behind the equipment shed. He was holding something in his hand, a black duffel. The shape inside was wrong for food. Too rigid, too square. "Police!" Daniel shouted. "Hands where I can see them." The man didn't stop. He bolted for the fence. But Shadow was faster. He lunged. The man barely made it 2 more steps before the full weight of the German Shepherd hit him mid-back. He went down hard, screaming as the duffel fell and burst open, revealing wiring, pipes, and a blinking red light. Daniel was already there, yanking the bag away and slamming his knee into the suspect's spine. "Disarm team, now!" he shouted into his radio. The suspect growled beneath him. "You don't know what they've done. You don't know. I know you brought a bomb into a school." Sirens began to wail in the distance. Daniel stood, panting, staring down at the fallen man. Shadow sat beside him, ears still sharp, watching. The gym was safe. The lawn was safe. The kids were safe. Shadow had felt it before anyone else. Not a sound, not a smell anyone else could have noticed. Just instinct. Just loyalty. Daniel reached down and rested his hand on Shadow's head. "You saved them," he whispered. Again. Shadow didn't react, didn't gloat. He just waited for the next order. For the next threat. For the next life to protect. And around them, as the children were led away to safety, the wind carried only one truth. The day had been about safety. And Shadow had delivered it. It started with mac and cheese. Trays clattered and chatter filled the Oak Ridge Valley cafeteria as staff prepared the midday meal. Laughter and music echoed faintly from outside, where the last group of students finished their turn at the bouncy castle. Teachers joked about pizza stains and juice spills. Another successful safety day. Daniel Cruz stood near the back wall with a cup of black coffee, watching it all with cautious calm. Shadow sat at his heel, eyes scanning like radar. He was off duty now. Leash removed, posture relaxed. But Daniel knew that relaxed for Shadow still meant one ear twitching for change. That's when it happened. Shadow lifted his head. Slowly, deliberately, he rose to all fours, hackles rising ever so slightly, and stepped forward. His movements were smooth, silent, but his body had changed. Tense, alert, he crossed the tile floor in a beeline toward the main serving counter. Past a pair of cafeteria workers ladling mashed potatoes. Past the hot pizza trays. Then he stopped. At the mac and cheese. One front paw lifted slightly. A low growl rumbled from his chest. And then, he barked. Once. Loud, piercing. Heads turned instantly. The room's warmth fractured into startled confusion. It wasn't playful. It wasn't show and tell. It was a warning. Daniel was already moving. He tossed the coffee, cleared the space in 4 strides, and stepped between Shadow and the food tray. "What is it, boy?" Shadow bared his teeth slightly. His eyes didn't leave the food. "Everyone stop," Daniel said sharply, raising one hand. "Nobody serve anything. Do not touch the food." A cafeteria worker holding a tray of juice froze mid-step. "Officer," she said, nervous, "it's just mac and cheese. It came from the same prep batch as everything else. Shadow doesn't bark like that unless something's wrong," Daniel said. He turned to the nearest teacher. "I need you to quietly move the students back to class. No announcements. No panic." The teacher blinked. "Is it a threat? I don't know yet, but we're treating it like one." The staff moved quickly. Students were ushered from the cafeteria in quiet lines. Some kids grumbled. Others looked confused. A few giggled. Until they saw the expression on Daniel's face. He wasn't smiling. Neither was Shadow. Within minutes, the cafeteria was cleared. Daniel radioed in code yellow, potential contamination, requesting public health and fire safety inspection team to Oak Ridge Elementary. Shadow has detected something in the food line. Copy, came the response. ETA 15. As he moved to secure the area, his eyes caught a small motion in the far corner of the kitchen. A teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17, removing an apron. He moved quietly, almost too quietly, slipping toward the staff exit near the back pantry. Daniel's instincts kicked in. "Hey, you there, stop." The boy froze, turned slowly. "Evan Blake," he said quickly, raising his hands. "I'm an intern. I was just I was told my shift was over after lunch prep." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Why are you leaving through the back?" Evan blinked. The main doors crowded. Daniel stepped forward, but Shadow moved first. He turned from the food line, then stood squarely in the path between Daniel and Evan. His posture was rigid again. Silent. Watching. Daniel didn't say a word. Evan glanced at Shadow, then forced a smile. "He's intense." "Huh?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, he doesn't like being lied to." Evan's smile faltered. Daniel motioned. "Sit down by the wall. You're not under arrest, but you're not leaving either. We'll talk when the inspectors get here." Reluctantly, Evan complied. Shadow stayed exactly where he was. Eyes on the boy, unblinking. 15 minutes later, the food safety and hazmat teams arrived, 2 men in sterile suits, followed by a uniformed inspector with a toolkit the size of a microwave. They were quick, professional, quiet. Within moments, the cafeteria was cordoned off with yellow tape. Daniel briefed them, standing beside Shadow. "We don't have any known threats," he said, but the dog's alert was direct. Targeted. He ignored every other tray. The inspector nodded. "Let's start with the obvious." They tested the air, then the food, then the tray itself. 10 minutes later, one of the techs looked up from his handheld scanner. "Trace chemical signatures," he said, frowning. "We're going to need to run a full panel to be sure. But this doesn't belong in mac and cheese. Or in any food, for that matter." "What is it?" Daniel asked. "Organophosphate residue. Industrial cleaning agent. High concentration." Daniel's stomach turned. "Like a pesticide?" "Worse," the tech said. "This stuff doesn't just clean, it lingers. Ingesting even small amounts could cause nausea, confusion, seizures in children. One more ladle and you'd have had a mass medical emergency." He turned to Shadow and gave the dog a long, respectful look. "Whatever training you gave him, it saved lives today." Daniel stood outside the cafeteria a short while later, watching as the cleanup crew sealed the contaminated area. The school had gone into partial lockdown, no panic. Just caution. Parents were being contacted. Staff were being interviewed. Evan Blake sat alone on a bench under faculty supervision. His eyes were locked on the ground. Daniel approached. Shadow beside him. "You know," Daniel said calmly, "that food was prepped hours ago. If it was tainted during delivery, Shadow would have caught it before. That means someone did it during or after prep. When the food was already on the line. Evan didn't speak. Daniel crouched to eye level. You were on kitchen duty. Unsupervised for at least 10 minutes. And you left early. Why? I didn't know what it was. Evan mumbled. It was just a little bottle. I found it in the back cabinet. I thought it was some kind of flavoring. I didn't mean. Stop. Daniel's voice sharpened. Don't lie to me again. Shadow won't like it. The boy looked up, pale. Okay, it wasn't an accident. Daniel waited. I didn't want to hurt anybody. Evan said. I swear, I was supposed to spoil the batch. Just enough to cancel the event. Create some noise. A distraction. A distraction for what? Evan hesitated. I don't know, I swear. The guy who gave me the bottle, he said it was just a prank. Just a delay. What guy? I don't know his name. He said he was part of a group. Something about systems control. That the school was a symbol. That safety day was a joke. Said we should show people how easily it could all fall apart. Daniel felt a cold chill crawl up his spine. This wasn't vandalism. This was ideology. He stood slowly. I'll need names, messages, any contact you had. If you help us, you may avoid serious charges. But you stay here until I say otherwise. Evan nodded quickly, looking more scared than ever. Daniel turned and walked back toward Shadow, who sat quietly by the cafeteria door, still watching the food tray as if it might get up and walk away. Daniel knelt down beside him. You caught it, he whispered. You saw what no one else could. He reached out and placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. Good work, partner. Again. Shadow didn't wag his tail. Didn't gloat. Just stayed at his post, silent, alert, and utterly still, waiting for whatever came next. The test results arrived the next morning, long after the cafeteria had been cleared. The students sent home early, and the staff briefed in hushed tones. Daniel Cruz sat in the administrative office, a tablet in his hand, reading the chemical report while Shadow lay curled at his feet. Not poison, not explosives, but something just as dangerous. The substance in the mac and cheese was Trigonol X, a powerful allergen compound used in industrial food testing. In trace amounts, it could cause mild irritation, but in the quantity found in that tray, anaphylactic shock. 3 students on file had severe food allergies. 1 bite would have been enough to send them into respiratory arrest. Daniel exhaled slowly and set the tablet down. This wasn't just a prank. This could have killed children. Evan Blake sat across the table in the guidance counselor's office. His shoulders hunched inward like he was trying to disappear. He wore the same green intern polo from yesterday, but now it hung on him like a uniform too big. His eyes were red-rimmed. His hands stuffed into the sleeves of his hoodie. Daniel sat beside the school principal, arms crossed. Shadow sat near the door, silent but watchful. We have the test results. Daniel said quietly, the chemical in the food isn't just unsafe. It's potentially lethal to kids with severe allergies. Evan flinched. I'm going to ask again. Daniel said. Did you put anything in the food? No, Evan said quickly. Then again, quieter. No. Daniel stayed silent. Let the weight of the moment sit. Evan stared at his hands. I didn't know it was that dangerous. I thought it would just make someone throw up. Just cancel the event. Daniel watched him. Waited. Evan's voice cracked. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted him to notice. Just once. Daniel exchanged a glance with the principal, who looked down sadly. Tell me what happened, Daniel said. Evan leaned back and wiped his eyes. They never said my name. Teachers, kids, even the other interns. No one remembered me. I'd walk into a room and it was like I wasn't there. I'd do the work. I followed the rules. Nothing changed. I wasn't anyone. His voice broke. I just wanted someone to look up and say, "Hey, that was Evan." I just wanted to matter. He looked up at Daniel. Tears in his eyes. I didn't know it could kill someone. Daniel's voice softened, but he didn't let go of the steel behind it. Attention doesn't make pain disappear. And almost hurting people isn't a solution. But you told the truth. That's a start. Evan looked away. The door opened behind them. An older woman stepped in, gray hair. Cardigan. Hands folded tightly in front of her. She looked like she hadn't slept. "Officer Cruz," she said, voice barely steady. "I'm Ruth Blake, Evan's grandmother." Daniel stood and offered his hand. She took it, her grip trembling. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her voice cracking. "I had no idea. He's been struggling. But I thought volunteering in the kitchen would help. Let him feel useful, like he was part of something." She looked at her grandson. "I didn't know he felt that invisible." Daniel nodded. Sometimes people don't say what they're feeling. They act it out instead. But that doesn't make the consequences go away. Evan buried his face in his hands. "I thought I was helping him," Ruth said softly, trying to give him something normal after everything, his parents, the move. He's all I've got." Daniel studied her for a long moment. There was no malice here. Just pain. Just a boy with too many bruises on the inside and no idea how to name them. He turned to the principal. "Let's do this the right way." He cooperated. He confessed. He didn't run. He paused. But he has to understand what he did. That afternoon, Daniel sat on the grass outside the school as the sun dipped low behind the trees. Shadow lay beside him, watching the wind roll through the branches. Across the field, a group of kids had resumed a small version of the safety day activities. No food this time. Just stories and a few games. Life creeping back to normal. As it always did. Evan sat quietly near the edge. Not participating. But not alone. Ruth sat beside him, her arm around his shoulders. Daniel watched them for a long moment. "Sometimes," he said to Shadow, "the people who shout the loudest are just trying to be heard." Shadow didn't move, just breathed slowly, eyes never leaving the field. Daniel reached down and ran a hand through the fur behind his ears. "You saw him first, didn't you?" he whispered. "You knew the real danger wasn't in the food. It was in the quiet. And somewhere deep inside." Daniel felt the faint echo of his own past, of the years after his partner's death. The months of isolation, the ache of being unseen. He understood Evan in a way no report ever could. He looked up at the sky. Sometimes the most dangerous people weren't the ones yelling. They were the ones no one ever heard. And sometimes, it took a dog to find them. The decision wasn't easy. There were meetings, long ones, with the school board, social workers, the police department, and child psychologists. There were discussions about liability, protocol, and precedent. But in the end, Daniel Cruz made his case clearly, firmly. We don't need to punish a cry for help. We need to answer it. Evan Blake had confessed. He had cooperated. He had been scared, confused, and dangerously misguided, but not malicious. And most of all, no one got hurt. So instead of pressing criminal charges, the school and police department made another call: rehabilitation over retribution. Evan would be placed into a support program, mandatory therapy, weekly check-ins, and something Daniel himself proposed: an observational apprenticeship at the K-9 training center just outside town. A place, Daniel had said, where silence speaks volumes. The first time Evan stepped into the K-9 facility, he looked like a ghost in borrowed shoes, awkward, withdrawn, a notebook clutched to his chest like a shield. He said almost nothing, just nodded when spoken to. Daniel met him in the parking lot. No chores, he said, no tests. You just watch. Learn how we listen to animals who don't use words. Evan nodded again. Inside, the center buzzed with energy, dogs of every size and color being trained for obedience. Detection, search and rescue. The air smelled of sawdust, fur, and rubber toys. Evan flinched the first time a dog barked. Then again the second time. But he didn't leave. Daniel didn't hover. He let Evan walk at his own pace. Notebook still tight in hand. Eyes scanning everything. The trainers. The routines. The commands. The subtle hand gestures. And, of course, Shadow. Shadow didn't acknowledge Evan at first. The German Shepherd had been trained to ignore distractions, to focus. But over the course of the first week, something shifted. Evan didn't try to pet him or call him. He just watched, quietly, constantly. By the second week, Shadow would glance at Evan as he passed, eyes flicking in recognition. By the third, he'd sit closer, not next to Evan, but near. Daniel noticed. Bonding without words. He said to one of the other handlers, "That's where it starts." One late afternoon, as the sun was lowering behind the kennels and the day's final drills wrapped up, Daniel found Evan sitting on a bench near the exercise yard. Shadow sat beside him, not on command, just by choice. Daniel approached slowly, hands in his jacket. Evan didn't look up at first. Then, after a pause, he said quietly, "I think I understand now." Daniel waited. Evan looked down at his notebook, fingers tapping it softly. "I used to think Shadow barked because something was wrong with the food. But it wasn't that, was it?" "Not really." He glanced sideways at the dog. It was something else, something off, something he just felt. Daniel nodded once. "Go on." Evan's voice was steadier now. "It's like," he didn't need to know the ingredients. He just knew something wasn't right. Like a kind of alarm. but not for danger outside. 4. I don't know. Inside. Like the room felt wrong. Daniel exhaled slowly. That's instinct. But more than that, it's empathy. Animals like Shadow pick up on energy we ignore. Stress, rage, fear, guilt. They read it all. Evan finally turned to face him. Then maybe that's what he sensed in me. Daniel didn't reply right away. He just watched the boy. I think he knew something was wrong. Evan continued. Not just with the food. But with me. That I was the one carrying the bad signal. There was a long silence. Then Daniel said, quietly, "That's why he watched you walk away." Evan nodded. They both sat for a moment longer. Shadow yawned and rested his head on Evan's foot. For the first time in a long while. Evan smiled. Just a little. But it was real. And Daniel smiled too. Not with pride. Not with relief. With recognition. Because somewhere deep down, he knew what it felt like to carry something unspoken and heavy. And what it meant when someone finally noticed, even if that someone walked on 4 legs and never said a word. It was a quiet morning at Oak Ridge Valley Elementary. No sirens. No commotion. Just the hum of early birdsong and the soft shuffle of chairs being arranged beneath the old sycamore tree beside the playground. A makeshift stage had been set up. Modest but thoughtful, draped in blue and gold school colors. Balloons danced gently in the breeze. Today was for Shadow. The staff called it a thank you ceremony. But to the students, it was something more. A celebration of a dog who'd protected them without needing to be told. Without needing to be asked. The children wore hand-drawn stickers that read, "Safe because of Shadow." Daniel stood at the podium in full uniform. But his face was calm. Open. Free of the usual steel he wore like armor. Shadow sat at his side. A brand-new collar around his neck. Its tag polished to a mirror shine. The principal stepped up first. Speaking about vigilance, about kindness, about how real heroes didn't always carry badges, sometimes. They carried chew toys. Then she nodded to Daniel. He took the stage, cleared his throat, and looked out at the kids. "There are times," he began, "when adults don't notice what they should. When teachers are overwhelmed. When parents are tired, when the world is noisy and fast, and a quiet cry for help goes unheard." He glanced down at Shadow, then back to the audience. "And there are times when a child is scared to speak, unsure if they'll be believed. Times when silence isn't peace, it's pain." Daniel paused, his voice steady. "In those moments, we need someone who sees what we don't. Someone who doesn't need words to understand something is wrong. Shadow is that someone." He looked at the students. "When grown-ups don't see. When kids can't say. Sometimes all it takes," he pointed to Shadow, "is a single bark to pull us back to the right side." The crowd applauded. A few teachers wiped their eyes. The principal stepped forward again and, with a broad smile, pinned a small silver badge to Shadow's vest. It read, "Guardian of Oak Ridge, the one who heard." The children erupted in cheers. Shadow, ever stoic, gave one bark, just one, as if to say, "You're welcome." The story didn't stay in Oak Ridge. Within a week, The school's Facebook post had gone viral. Photos of Shadow sitting calmly beside the tainted food tray. Daniel kneeling next to him during the ceremony. And the silver badge gleaming in the sun were shared thousands of times. Messages poured in, from parents, teachers, students, and strangers. Local news stations called, then national ones. But Daniel wasn't interested in fame. He turned down interviews, politely declined the camera crews. Instead, he and Shadow began quietly visiting schools. Not with sirens or demonstrations, just conversations. About safety, about trust, about what goes unseen, and, most importantly, about mental health. They spoke not just about food and danger, but about loneliness. And listening. At one school, Daniel ended a session by kneeling beside Shadow and saying, "Maybe the bravest thing isn't barking. Maybe it's staying still long enough to hear what others miss." That clip made its own rounds. Counselors called it the start of a new way to teach empathy. Daniel just called it work that matters. A week later, a letter arrived at the station. It was addressed by hand. No return address. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. Written in neat block letters. "Dear Officer Cruz, I thought I wanted to be seen. But what I really wanted was to be understood. I don't want to make noise anymore. I want to learn how to listen, like Shadow. Thank you for not giving up on me. Evan." Daniel read it twice, then tucked it into his locker, right behind his badge. He never replied. He didn't have to. On a late Friday afternoon, as the last of the spring sun dipped behind the trees, Daniel and Shadow sat side by side on the school's front steps. The building was quiet now. The final bell long since rung. A light breeze rustled through the leaves. Distant laughter from the playground lingered in the air. Beside them stood a new wooden plaque, freshly mounted just outside the cafeteria. The engraving read, "In honor of Shadow, the dog who heard what no one said. For his instinct, for his loyalty, for his silence that spoke volumes." Daniel glanced at the plaque. Then at Shadow. The old dog lay peacefully, eyes half-lidded, ears twitching at each small noise around them. "You hear it all, don't you?" Daniel murmured. Even now, Shadow didn't move, but Daniel smiled. Because some heroes don't chase glory. They just sit. They watch. They wait. And they listen until someone needs them most. And when they speak, it's never loud, just enough to be heard.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.